Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Kate Hamilton here in our digital news desk. We have sort of a special segment here today because we are joined live by Representative Brooks Landgraf. Brooks, thank you so much for being here today.
Mary Kate, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the end of another regular legislative session. What would you say are some of your biggest accomplishments for West Texas in these last few months in session?
Well, no, thank you. So it has been a busy 5-month legislative session down at the state capitol in Austin. And I would say that from my perspective as a state rep from West Texas, the big victories are the 3 Bs, border security, a balanced budget, and Basin victories. And I'm happy to go into some detail, but there were more than 1,000 bills that we passed during this legislative session. Most of those are going to be good policy for the state of Texas. We also fell short in a few areas, but I would say we did have some tremendous victories that are good not only for our state, but particularly for us here in West Texas.
And now I said, there we go. Now I said end of the regular session because you all are not done yet. Special session is in session. What do you think is coming up next down the pipeline for the legislature?
Well, I think, and this is a good thing to fight about, but right now the House has adjourned for this first special session because we passed a bill that proposes the largest tax cut, property tax cut in the history of the state of Texas. We've unanimously passed that and sent it over to the Senate. Now we're basically just waiting for the Senate to pass that same bill so that we can have this whopping property tax cut that can really save, I mean, it's worth $17.6 billion. And when you spread that out across every property owner in the state of Texas, that's real money back into the pockets of people all across the state and right here in West Texas. Now, if the Senate doesn't pass the same bill that we passed in the House, then I think that could trigger almost automatically another special session. And we're also looking, and the governor, by the way, is the only person in state government who can call a special session, and he has indicated that he does intend to call another special session related to education policy either this summer or in the fall. So there could be several trips back to the Capitol to finish the work of the people of Texas, but we do have some very important issues. One thing that I want to focus on in an upcoming special session is to increase the basic allotment for public schools across our state, and also to get teachers a very well-deserved and long-awaited raise so that we can be competitive with teacher salaries in other states. So I definitely have some things that I still want to accomplish in special sessions throughout this year.
And border security, if I'm not mistaken, is another thing that they are in special session for right now. Obviously, that is an issue that is close to many West Texans' hearts. What are they looking at in that?
Yeah, so on the same day that we passed this monumental property tax cut bill, we also passed a border security measure that increases the penalty for human traffickers, also increases the penalty for those who operate a drug stash house, particularly for fentanyl-related crimes. Now, Mary Kate, I do want to say this is on top of legislation that we passed in the regular session that increases the penalty for anybody who's involved in the manufacture or trafficking or distribution of deadly fentanyl. And it's also in addition to $5 billion that we are investing right here in the state of Texas in our ongoing border security operation. Basically, our idea is that the Biden administration is refusing to secure the border, and that's allowing things like fentanyl to stream across the border, as well as human trafficking and other types of illegal organized crime. And so when the Biden administration is not going to do its job, we're going to step up and do that here in Texas. So that $5 billion is going to help continue building a border wall that's already under construction in South Texas, and also is part of Operation Lone Star, where we have 10,000 DPS state troopers and Texas National Guardsmen who are on Border Patrol duty as part of Operation Lone Star. They're making a big impact. I really appreciate all the men and women who are involved in that operation. It really is making a big impact, but we still have more work to do, and that's why we're making this big investment with the taxpayer dollars of hardworking Texans. Even though this is absolutely a national problem, we're on the front lines and we're going to do something about it.
Now, you mentioned it's been a busy session. And there's been a lot that's happened, including the possible impeachment of Attorney General Ken Paxton. You explained this on your Facebook page, but for those who maybe didn't see it, we also covered it on CBS 7. You explained your vote to impeach as more of a vote for the Texas Constitution and a vote for doing things the right way in the legislature. Can you explain that?
I sure can. I mean, this is obviously a big deal. It's very rare. We have not had any impeachment proceeding in the state of Texas since 1975. So this is the first time in my lifetime that anything like this has happened. I do want to be very clear, though. Unlike federal impeachment proceedings that I think most people are accustomed to or aware of, it works a little bit differently in Texas. So the vote to impeach Attorney General Paxton or any other state official when a vote like this comes up does not result in the removal of that elected official from office. It simply is a recommendation that the Senate try the articles of impeachment. So it's basically like the role that the Texas House of Representatives, where I serve, plays is we're like a grand jury, and we have to determine under the Constitution, under state law, and under our own House rules if there is enough evidence to recommend that a full trial be had in the Senate. And so given the evidence that was provided to us in the House and given my oath of office that I took under the state Constitution, I really felt like I had no other choice, even though it was with a fellow Republican. The evidence definitely warranted that we send this and recommend that the Senate try Attorney General Paxton on the 20 counts of impeachment that were presented to us. And we are prohibited under the Constitution from having a trial, from interviewing witnesses, cross-examining, things like that. That's for the trial phase, and that will take place this summer in the Senate. And Attorney General Paxton will have every opportunity to defend himself, to cross-examine witnesses under oath. That's really where the trial plays out, and I think that's one way or another we'll get some finality on this issue. We'll get some answers. But I did, I did believe at the time of the vote, and I continue to believe today, that it was my constitutional obligation, given the evidence, to vote for that, even though it's against a fellow Republican. The approach that I take is, if we as Republicans can't abide by the law or hold each other accountable, then we certainly can't call out the other party when we see corruption in their ranks or what we perceive to be corruption. So it's a constitutional issue, and it's also a principled stand, and I look forward to all of the facts, all of the evidence coming to light, and hopefully justice will be served one way or another, and whatever the Senate determines, I will accept that outcome.
And you were far from the only Republican to vote that way as well.
Yeah, that's right. About actually 70% of the House Republicans voted in favor of the articles of impeachment. So it was pretty overwhelming.
Now, of course, there's always more to be done. That is kind of the joy of the United States government, the way that it's set up. So what is one thing that maybe you didn't accomplish this session, or what is one thing that you would like to keep pushing for? Well,
so I talked about the 3 Bs that we did get done: border security, both in the regular session and a little bit in the special session; a balanced budget where we did not raise taxes on Texans, but we are able to meet the needs of a growing state while also building in room for property tax cuts and also building in room for school safety. Also, some of the wins under that budget for the Permian Basin are that we are continuing to invest in a Permian Basin Behavioral Health Center, which is going to provide mental health services to the people of Odessa, Midland, Monahans, Kermit, Andrews. The entire Permian Basin will be served by this state-of-the-art facility that we desperately need to treat mental health here in the Permian Basin. So we were able to get tremendous resources for that facility. Also wins for the Permian Basin, and I know I'm going to get back to the things that we need to do, but also very proud of 2 bills, one of which was just signed into law by the governor on Tuesday, that really help send a message to local governments, big city governments here in Texas, who are trying to do harm to the oil and gas industry, and also to the Biden administration, who unfortunately we're seeing at every turn is trying to do harm to the oil and gas industry. And so actually passed 2 of these bills. One is the Texas Energy Independence Act, which says that Texas will not use any of our own resources to help enforce unconstitutional or overreaching federal regulations on oil and gas production. So look, the feds are going to do what they're going to do, but they're not going to have help from Texas doing it. The other is, we call it the engine ban, which we don't have a problem with this in West Texas, but the city of Dallas, for example, is proposing to outlaw the use or operation of gasoline engines within its city limits, or diesel engines. So that could apply depending on how they want to enact this ordinance, from lawnmowers all the way up to the family minivan. That's not a policy that's going to work well in Texas. First of all, it's kind of ridiculous on its face. Second of all, even if there were some merit to the policy, which I don't believe that there is, we can't have every city, every municipality in the state having a different policy when it comes to what type of engines can be used, because then you just end up with a patchwork of completely unrelated rules and regulations. So we were able to ban the enforcement of any type of engine ban, whether it's in Dallas or any other place. Thankfully, no municipal governments here in West Texas have had have taken that approach. So this is more about some of the left-leaning big cities in the state, but very proud that we send that message. And look, we're proud of what we do here in the Permian Basin. This is the oil and gas production epicenter of the continent and increasingly the world. We do it well, we do it cleaner, and we do it safer than anybody else, and we're proud of that, and we don't want anybody to get the wrong idea about what that means, not only for ourselves, but for our country. So very proud of the 3 Bs, but in terms of what I think we need to focus on moving forward in a subsequent special session, we've got to make sure that Texas teachers who are hardworking and increasingly underpaid, we've got to get them raises because the work that they do is tremendously important. They've in many cases gone on a long time without getting a raise. And in places like the Permian Basin, where the cost of living is higher than the state on average, we need teachers to have a competitive salary so that we can attract and retain the best and brightest teachers to stay here and be able to afford the cost of living in a place like the Permian Basin, where the average apartment rent is much higher than it is in other cities across the state. So look, it's good policy. Our students deserve to have the best and brightest teaching them, and we've got to make that investment. And so when we do get called back for a special session, increasing funding for teacher raises is going to be a priority for me. And here's the good news. We have money to do it. I talked about that balanced budget earlier. Even though we couldn't come to an agreement on the best way to give teachers raises, we have money that has not been spent in that budget so that we can finish the job on teacher raises, on other education funding priorities, and on this once in a lifetime property tax cut. So we've got the money there. We've just got to finish the job, and I'm looking forward to fighting until the job is done.
Now, we've touched on it a little bit, but this legislative session was also special because there was a historic budget surplus. You've touched on maybe using it towards teacher raises, using it towards property cuts. Are there any other ways in which it could be used, or you think it will be used, that will benefit West Texas specifically? Yeah,
so I think, Mary Kate, you've identified what those priorities are. So a $33 billion budget surplus, which is by far the largest that we've ever had in the history of the state of Texas. And by the way, that's coming from your sales tax revenue. The overwhelming majority of that $33 billion surplus is coming from a very healthy Texas economy that's where a lot of goods and services are being sold, and there's a sales tax associated with that. But one thing that's important to keep in mind is that we've also seen record-breaking inflation in the last couple of years, thanks to policies from the Biden administration. And so families, hardworking Texans, need to get as much of that money back in their pockets to help pay for increased grocery bills or increased costs for car repairs or whatever. We want that money back in the hands of taxpayers. That's why out of that $33 billion, we lopped $17.6 billion off the top, right at about half, and that is what we're using for the tax cut. The rest is being used for infrastructure improvements, teacher raises like we've talked about. One key thing, and of course it's been about a year ago where we experienced a water shortage crisis here in the city of Odessa, and that's happening in cities all across Texas where aging water infrastructure is leaving communities without water for days at a time. It's because we had a tremendous boom here in Texas, including West Texas, back in the 50s, when a lot of communities were growing. Water infrastructure pipes were put in place at that time, and now they're at the end of their useful life and they need to be replaced. Problem is that just takes money. So we've used a part of the budget surplus to create a grant account funds where municipalities like the city of Odessa can get money from the state and use that to rebuild or replace aging water infrastructure. So very proud of that. We also have money in the budget with the help of surplus funds to invest in our transportation infrastructure. We've seen record-breaking investments by TxDOT, and I've worked really hard as vice chair of the Transportation Committee to do that. That's why people see construction zones on I-20, on Loop 330, Loop 338, Loop 250, all across West Texas. That's not an accident. We've been very deliberate about making those investments in this infrastructure. We have money in this budget to continue doing that. So, look, we have a lot of needs. We're a state of 30 million plus. We're growing by 1,100 people every day. We want to continue to be the economic engine for the United States. But to do that, you have to have things in place like good infrastructure. You have to have water. You have to have roads. You have to have teachers in schools. Last thing, we also have made tremendous and record-breaking investments in school safety to make sure that all of our, the 6 million little Texans who go to school every day can do so knowing that that they are in a safe environment. And that's one thing that we feel like Texans deserve, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is on that front too.
Well, Representative Landgraf, thank you so much for joining us again, and congratulations on almost getting through another legislative session. Hopefully you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we really appreciate you coming in and talking to all of us about it.
Thank you for having me, Mary Kate. I appreciate it.